So I'm in a school of public health. And I deal with boiling frog problems. I don't know if you've heard of this boiling frog, but if you drop a frog in boiling water, the frog jumps out. That's the metaphor anyway. But if you drop a frog in cool water and just ever so gradually increase the heat, the frog gets sleepy and the frog kind of rolls over and the frog croaks, right? Very slow. These are public health problems, actually, that we're dealing with. So this is a public health problem. This is a public health problem. This is a public health problem. Over time, just ever so gradually, things get worse and worse. And they do organizationally, they do individually, they do societally as well, and we don't notice it. So let's say we're all therapists, and we're all trying to help this frog get out of the pot. How would we do it? It makes so much sense to yell at this frog, hey, frog, you're going to die. If you stay in this, you're going to croak for sure. So what would the frog say? The frog might go, oh, right? But the frog would probably be thinking this, what do you know? Are you an expert on boiling water? Are you an expert on climate change? Have you been an alcoholic before? Have you done this before? Have you done that before? Have you been in a real business before? This water isn't so hot. Our culture isn't so bad. I'm not an alcoholic. We don't have climate change. Now go away, I'm getting kind of sleepy, right? You've heard this before. That's what I deal with in public health as a professor. So I started thinking, what's going on? And I like to think of this Pyrex pot almost as your ego. And one thing, by the way, when I was introduced by Andrew, he mentioned that I'm a good dancer. I'm only a good dancer to myself. So, and the only way I'm a good dancer is when I lose my ego totally. I started when I was in 9th grade. I'll never forget this. I was at a sock hop, and I asked this girl to dance, and we were like dancing around to Edgar Winter's Frankenstein. And if you're as old as me, and I have cavities more older than most of you, but if you are as old as me, you remember that song. It had this interlude kind of electronica, and it's like, and I'm like, and I'm doing this great thing, and I'm like, down, and I'm really down on the floor, and it's in 9th grade, and she's like, and then I'm closing my eyes, and I'm totally ego-free, and I'm digging this so much. And then I open my eyes, and the entire dance floor is, everybody is surrounding me. And this girl says, are you okay? I kid, it's a true story. I am such a bad dancer. But anyway, I love removing that ego, so I'm going to talk about that because that's self-transcendence. So it turns out we can try to scare the shit out of this woman, right? We can put nasty messages on the back of the cigarette pack, you're going to die, right, all the time. And the other thing that Mickey said was death was not scaring her, death defined her. Wasn't it? 9/11 was defining for her life. We'll get to that in just a bit. But typically, people who smoke, why do they smoke? What's the number one reason people smoke, men and women? Stress. Control stress. So when we scare the crap out of her, what do? We just induce stress. I rest my case, right? So people often smoke more. But this is really wild. If we ask her to just think about her purpose in life or her core values, what do you care about the most in your life? I'm here to be a good mom. I'm here to be in control of my life. I'm here to be a good spouse. She is 40% more likely to go ahead and quit smoking. Just by asking her what she cares about the most. That's it. Not by scaring the crap out of her. The total opposite. She'll go ahead and move forward and quit. Now, these are some core values. You may love enjoyment, expertise, creativity, your reputation, relationships. You know, there are a lot of different values lists. They've been around for a long time. But it turns out if we start asking those, and having people write those down, they become less defensive. Somehow that ego wall drops. So this woman, Jennifer Crocker, a psychologist at Michigan, asked this great question, why does writing down your core values reduce defensiveness? It's a pretty nice question to ask, I would think, especially in my field where so many people are defensive about so many different things. And it turns out what she did was just have people think out loud while they were writing down their core values. And they started talking about and thinking about love and compassion and kindness and caring and community. So here's what she concluded, that these studies in concert with previous research suggest that values affirmation, affirming your core purpose or values, reduces defensiveness via self-transcendence. Now, by the way, my undergraduate degree was in math and computer science. I had one psychology class and I was almost thrown out because I was looking sullen through the whole class. Finally, the professor said, "You in the back, why are you always looking so sullen?" I said, "You don't want to know." He said, "No, share your feelings." And I'm going, "You don't want to know my feelings." "No, share it with the class." I said, "Okay, fine. In my physics class, if I drop this, it goes down 100% of the time. In this psychology class, if I let go of it, it goes up half the time. I don't like that. It's mush. You're just mush, predicting mush. It bothers me too much. I don't like it." And yet what I understood gradually over, trying to get more mature in my life is that those mushy things are the most important things in the world that we deal with. That's why I embrace this idea of the love summit. I thought, okay, now that is mush right there. That's as mushy as it gets. This is not like a Fortran algorithm that I learned in 1974. This is like serious, like mush. So self-transcendence is mushy too, and I'm really into it. And Abraham Maslow got really into it too. You remember him? He was the father of humanistic psychology. Imagine in the 50s and 60s, he was the god of psychology. And he created this hierarchy of needs. So you had your physiological, safety, social needs, esteem needs, but at the very top, is so popular in the 60s, self-actualization. I want my peak experience. I want to be fully actualized. I want to climb Kilimanjaro. I want to, do a triathlon. It's perfect for the me generation, isn't it? Just absolutely perfect for like self-enhancing hedonic well-being. And then a guy named Viktor Frankl approached him and said, I've gone through 3 concentration camps as the prisoner physician of those concentration camps. I noticed that people, if they weren't murdered outright, that often they would get sick and die, but first they would lose their purpose in life. And they didn't get sick and then lose their purpose and then die. They lost their purpose and meaning in life, then they got sick and they died. And he wrote this famous book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is awesome. But he also wrote a dozen other books that talked about this attention to detail that he had even while he's a prisoner in 3 concentration camps and he lost his family. And he said, you know what? Abraham Maslow, you're wrong. The top is not self-actualization. It's called self-transcendence. It's doing things bigger than yourself. It's thinking about things bigger than yourself, not just yourself. It's not just about you. And you know what Abraham Maslow said? Now remember, most famous God psychologist of the 1960s, he had his model. His model was like stone there. Why would he ever change it? He said, you know what? You're absolutely right. And I'm totally wrong. You are right. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career studying transcenders. And that's exactly what Abraham Maslow did. So he's an organizational psychologist. He studied this in companies. And he started looking at this, and he noticed that transcenders find it much easier to transcend the ego, the self, the identity, to go beyond self-actualization. These are his words. But also, he said, they are the innovators in a company. They're the people who see the bigger picture, and they're going to push your company forward. So once he was asked, are these guys happy? Are these self-transcenders happy? And this is an interesting comment. He said, maybe not. He said, why not? Well, because of one thing, the contrast that they see between what actually is and the ideal world that these guys can see so vividly, which is in principle so easily attainable, makes them maybe not so happy. Because they can see it so clearly. They can see through that wall, through that Pyrex pot. In fact, they're transcending the Pyrex pot. That makes sense? They're actually rising above the pot where it's distorted. They can see clearly. Aristotle, 2,400 years ago, said, you know what? There are 2 kinds of happiness, though. And this is relevant. One is hedonic happiness. We all know about hedonic happiness. In fact, now in Western culture, when we say, are you happy? People say, yeah, I'm happy. I have more toys than I ever had. Or I'm in Disney World, or I'm at a spa, or I've got a great car, or I've got, a hot wife, or whatever it is. I've got all of these great things. I am happy, right? Okay, and Aristotle said we all dig those things, and it's fine. It's no problem if we're hedonically happy. But if that's all we are, he literally said this. He said, if all we are hedonically happy, then we are like, quote, grazing animals. We all like to graze, right? We all love to graze on food, nice wine, good sex, whatever those things are. Cars, nice spas, whatever. That makes perfect sense. And he said, cool, no problem. But if that's all we are, we're not really human beings. He talked about eudaimonic well-being. And the core of this is this word daemon. Daemon means in Greek, your true self. your true or God-like self. It's often God self, it's often true self. If you're Hindu, this is called the Atman, this inner true God self inside you, an inner light. Socrates talked about this. Every once in a while, by the way, in this David painting, Plato's on the left. He's actually painted much older than he really was when he was a student of Socrates, but Socrates was kind of a street philosopher. Imagine him kind of in an alley in Cincinnati, and he's kind of spouting off, and you're going to like walk around him going, yeah, don't make eye contact, because you don't want him to talk to you. But it turns out like a lot of students were around him, including Plato, not bad. And every once in a while, one of these students would ask him a question he could not answer. And so he would stroll back into the alley to consult his inner daemon. And he'd say, I'd be back in 20 minutes. And then he'd come out and he'd have the right answer. And people would go, wow, he is so amazing. Also, one thing that's been written about him consistently is that he was incredibly ugly, unbelievably ugly. All the students, anybody who wrote about Socrates said, by the way, really ugly dude. He was not like this at all. He was ugly. But they said, you know what, even though he's ugly, they likened him to the Greek sculptors who would create these beautiful terracotta sculptures of the busts of gods. And if you tapped on these, they would put in this beautiful figurine inside that they called the daemon. And said, he's like that. He's like this beautiful figurine inside. Pretty amazing. So that daemon, that leads to eudaimonic, or eudaimonia, which is a different type of happiness overall. Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina wanted to study this 2,400 years later. Pretty amazing. So what she did was ask everybody whether, imagine this whole group, we might have a list of questions about whether you care a lot about love and community and kindness and compassion, eudaimonic well-being, transcending well-being, or do you care a lot about your appearance and about, material goods and your reputation? And by the way, people have both. And sure enough, everybody had combinations of both. But some people had a lot of eudaimonia, other people had a lot of hedonia. Make sense so far? Then she asked everybody, are you happy? And if you had a lot of eudaimonia, you were happy. If you had a lot of hedonia, you were happy. In fact, you could not tell from a happy person whether they're eudaimonically happy or hedonically happy. You couldn't tell. Phenotypically, you just couldn't tell. So she studied their gene expression. So she started looking and asking the question, how much pro-inflammatory cell production do you have? And pro-inflammatory cells are not good for you. They are initially, like if you cut yourself, you inflame a little bit, it closes the wound, that's a good thing. But too much pro-inflammatory cell production leads to heart disease, even some cancers, kidney disease, many, many other problems, serious problems that kill you. So you don't want too much pro-inflammatory cell production. She also looked at antibodies. You want those. Antibodies are really good for you. So sure enough, she looked at the people who were primarily hedonic. They had far more pro-inflammatory cell production. Eudaimonic people, much less pro-inflammatory cell production. Hedonic, much less antibody cell production, the good stuff. Eudaimonic, much more antibody. In other words, and this is her conclusion, while you couldn't tell, based on their happiness measure, just, are you happy or not, whether you're eudaimonically happy or hedonically happy, physiologically, these people were 180 degrees different. Completely different. Now, when I first read this study, I thought, I don't know, I want to see a replication of that study because this is almost like Pollyanna a little bit. It's a little bit hard to believe this study. It's too nice, too good, too sweet. There are 4 other studies that have replicated this now. Bigger studies, even better studies, and they continue. There are some studies of this even in occupational health settings. So my own life was quite hedonic for most of my childhood, growing up, dancing badly, and then my daughter, Julia, got sick. She was born healthy, and when she was 6 months old, I was just going through the standard tenure track at the University of North Carolina. Not a problem, kind of sailing through, writing Islamic science, blah, 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 writing a lot of articles, and a lot of research. And then suddenly my 6-month-old got really sick. She caught a chickenpox virus, which everybody catches, and it causes a fever, a little rash, and gets better. But this attacked her heart. And suddenly, we were told that she had about 2 or 3 months to live because it totally destroyed her heart. And we had no hope. We were in the Netherlands. I was on sabbatical and doing research there, and they said, go home. We went home the next day. And we talked to a doctor there, and they said she might be eligible for a heart transplant. And she ended up becoming one of the first children in the United States to get a heart transplant. Now, we had to decide at first whether to even list her for a heart, because we were told, well, about half the kids who have waited so far failed to get one, because there are not enough donors, which is a good thing in a way. Also, if you do get a heart, those kids, 50% survive only 5 years or less. So we knew that her chances were 50% times 50% or 25% of even living to become 5 years old. So we thought, should we do this at all? So we started talking about it as a family, and we decided if we could give her a life of some purpose. And when you're 3 years old, maybe you have a different purpose than if you're 6 years old, or 10 years old, or 20 years old, or 50 years old. We have different purposes and meaning and commitment to life, but we thought if we could give her a big life, then it's probably worth continuing. So we decided to do that, and that became my purpose, to give her a purpose. And it turned out to be really engaging because she had an amazing life, then going through Girl Scouts and softball, and she was a horrible softball player. She never got a hit. It was terrible. She got one hit in like 3 seasons, and I went, oh my God, this is so great. You got a hit. And then I started thinking, wow, whenever any of the girls got a hit, I just went, great, wonderful. And then, it started like just transferring to us, like this joy whenever you got a hit, metaphorically. Whenever you got, when something cool happened, you just stopped and took a breath and went, wow, that is so cool. And so when Mickey was saying, man, I was almost killed in 9/11, and she had that transformation, like, I'm not going to live forever. Julia taught me that I'm not going to live forever either, because I kept thinking, boy, what will be at our memorial service? What will be on her headstone? I thought, wait a second, what will be on mine? Life is short, so let's figure out what to do to live a bigger life. And it completely transformed my life. So we took her, she wanted to give back. I mean, you talk about a eudaimonic person. She wanted to become a nurse. So she went to the University of Michigan, got into nursing school, very smart kid. And I'm her dad, but very smart, and was doing well, but also, it just looked like she was having some trouble, but we couldn't tell. We had her checked out, no problem. We took her and her boyfriend to the Caribbean for spring break, because she was a little pooped. And we took our older daughter, Rachel, and her boyfriend. We got them rooms on the beach. And a lot of people said, what? She's 19, she's with her boyfriend, blah, blah. And I said, look, we treat her as if every day she might go. We don't know. And we now treat ourselves as if every day we might go, because you never know. It's interesting because Stoic philosophers would do the same thing. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers and also one of the best Roman emperors of ancient Rome, would wake up every morning and say, I'm going to die today. Read it in his book, Meditations, one of the most modern books you'll ever read. Meditations, just 90 pages, amazing. He'd wake up and go, I'm going to die today. Can you imagine Mrs. Aurelius? Like, would you stop it, Marcus? No, I'm going to die today. You say that every morning. No, I'm going to die. No, you don't. Now finish your cereal and go to war. And, that sort of thing. She said, no, I do that to live a bigger life. I know you do it every day. You're so annoying. So anyway, you could imagine that idea that we lived every day to the bone as if this might be our last, so let's live a big life. And not like a Make-A-Wish life, which I love, that foundation. So we didn't want to meet Cameron Diaz and go to Disney World. It's just living a big, purposeful life. That's all I meant. So anyway, we're in the 3rd day of this. We go to the beach, and we're having dinner right on the beach. And we're walking along, and then she goes back to the room with Brian, her boyfriend, and she turns to him before she goes to bed, and she said, I'm so happy, Brian, right now, that I could die. Those were her last words. So she just died suddenly in her sleep of a heart attack. So when that happened 7 years ago, I was broken open myself. It's like my Pyrex pot just broke completely. I didn't transcend, it just got broken open, and I started seeing very differently. But the first couple months, I started literally I went to northern Michigan, I just hung out on Lake Michigan, and all I did was drink and eat and drink more and eat more and watch the Kardashian sisters on TV and all the shit that's on. And because I didn't care, really. And one morning I had a big dream. And in that dream, I had my daughter in it. And the night before, I'd read this poem by Rumi. Do you know who Rumi is? Okay, like, I was not a Rumi. I didn't read philosophy. It's so boring. And Rumi, oh my God, poetry, so boring. But suddenly, these guys were writing letters to me, it felt like. Literally, like letters to me. And Rumi had this amazing poem that said, your dreams at night have secrets to tell you. Don't go back to sleep. And at 5 in the morning, I had this amazing dream with my daughter in it, rollerblading in this ancient town. And I won't get into it, but I woke up at 5 in the morning with my pillow was tear-stained and just soaked, actually. And I woke up and I thought, I've got to go back to bed because I've just got to see her again. Because it's so vivid. If you've ever had a hyper-vivid dream, this is a true hyper-vivid dream. It's like she was there. I have to go back and say hi to her. And I just woke up, and I remember that Rumi poem. I said, I'm not going back to sleep. And I looked outside, and I could see Lake Michigan there, and it's beautiful. And I just jumped into my kayak literally within 30 seconds. And it was 40 degrees outside, and it was foggy, and it was still just pitch black. And I jumped in my boxers and T-shirt, and I know that's too much information, although Mickey beat the hell out of that, right? So I jumped in with my boxers and T-shirt, and you're supposed to wear a neoprene suit, which I had. I just jumped in, and I don't know why, but the water was so smooth, I just started paddling and paddling and paddling, and I was going crazy. Like, just, oh man, this is so beautiful, and it's foggy and freezing cold. I didn't care. I didn't feel any of it, and I truly didn't care about anything, and I just kept going, and it felt so good, and I thought, wow, maybe I'll just paddle to Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is 80 miles away, which would have been really stupid. And I stopped, and I saw the sun come up. The sun came up, and suddenly, and this is a totally true story, and I saw the sun come up, and everything was sparkling around me. And I started looking into the sun, and I felt my daughter, Julia, in me. And I'm a scientist. I'm skeptical about just about everything. It's just like, show me. I want this proven. I felt Julia in me, and I felt her telling me something. I felt her saying, you have to get over this, Dad. And if you don't, you'll die. You have a choice right now, 2.5 miles out onto Lake Michigan, where you can barely see the shore anymore. The sun is coming up right now. You can go to Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's your choice, and you'll die. Or you can turn around. But if you turn around, you will have to change your life. It's as simple as that. Now, I am not saying I'm special in this at all, because I'll bet almost every one of you in this room has had a, quote, crossroad experience. And I had it literally on the water, which is kind of crazy. It's so metaphorical. God, come on, is this cliche or what? But there I was in the middle of Lake Michigan, and I felt her saying, you have to get over this. And it wasn't like, you have to get over this, Dad. It was like, you have to get over your ego. You have to get over this Pyrex pot and see clearly, or you'll die. And it's simple. You have a choice. And nobody cares. You just have to figure this out. I love the talk this morning, with that, I don't care. I just love that part with the guy, in the movie just saying, I don't care. And that's kind of how I felt. Nobody really cared about this except me, and I had a choice to make. By the way, I have to tell you, I made myself in this imagery look thinner and more handsome than I really am. It's true. The illustrator said, it's your book, dude, that's fine. I wrote a book about this, a graphic novel. But I did ask him to make my daughter look exactly the way she really did, and this is a picture of her. So that's Julia. So Steve Jobs said this. He said that death is very likely the single best invention of life. He said this while he was dying, and he was giving the 2005 commencement address at Stanford. All these amazing students, and he said, yeah, you're all going to die, and by the way, it's a great thing. It's life's change agent. Pretty amazing, wasn't it? He wanted to make a ding in the universe. He had a transcending purpose in his life. This is my purpose. And by the way, purposes change over time, but it has 4 components, this one does, and this is my current purpose, to enjoy love and beauty, very hedonic, my personal purpose. My family purpose, to be an engaged son, because I have 2 86-year-old parents. Husband, father, and grandfather now, little Madeline Julia, 2 years old, real pistol, to teach every student as if they're Julia. That means I have 1,200 Julias right now. That's a lot of Julias to deal with, and they have all sorts of issues and problems, and it may be from I got a C and I'm worried about getting into med school to I have a real drinking problem to I have an internet porn problem to I'm really depressed to whatever it is, and people tell me these things and I'm just going, I'm not a therapist, really. You can go over to the counseling services, but I'm happy to sit and talk to you because I'm thinking you're my daughter, and what would I want for my daughter? And to study purpose in life. I thought, what a fuzzy area to study, purpose in life. And all I mean by purpose is that you look at your core values, the things you care about the most, and you set goals around them. You set goals around the things that matter most. You set goals around the things that you love. We know that setting a goal works a lot better than saying, do your best. I'm trying to be loving today versus I want to set a goal around being loving today. How do you do that? And then finally, to help over 1 billion people. This is a study that we did because I do a lot of work with fMRI, neural imaging, and I wanted to see, is there a part of the brain that relates to purpose? And so we put people into MRI. These are sedentary people, way overweight, and they really needed to work out more, and we gave them all accelerometers for a week, and then we had them recite their most important purposeful values, or their least important purposeful values, and then we followed them for a month looking at accelerometry, and I won't get into detail, but one thing that we found is that when we randomly assign them to focus more on their most important purpose, they reduced their sedentary behavior by a lot, compared to the other group that didn't reduce their sedentary behavior at all. And what we also found is that there's a part of the brain here called the ventral medial prefrontal cortex that as they were thinking more about their purpose, that lit up. That got a lot more oxygenated blood flow, and that part of the brain relates to the self. When you're thinking about your true self, this part gets more blood flow. All you have to do, you can point right here. By the way, a lot of you have these little things on your dome, right? Okay, you point there, you drill back. Don't drill, you'll die. But go back about 1/2 inch, and you have your VMPFC. That may be where the daemon is. Pretty interesting. For us, this leads to a whole bunch of further research, and we've done now 6 studies since then studying things like this, and are we hitting that part? But it's very interesting because that's the part of the brain that is also here in that third eye, which is interesting. I was in northern India, just north of Rishikesh, where they invented, the yoga, of all things, 3,000 years ago, where the Beatles wrote their White Album, pretty awesome place, and go up about an hour and a half north of there into the southern Himalayas, and I was studying with a guru there for a week to learn different forms of meditation, and I was bragging about this study a few years ago. Oh, by the way, we've got the MPFC, things like that. He said, oh, I know, that's where the third eye is. I said, yeah. He said, yeah, well, of course. We knew that would be more active. I said, how'd you know that? We've known it for 3,000 years. I said, you didn't have MRIs 3,000 years ago. He said, yes, but you meditate in the cave for 6 months and you become your own MRI, dude. Really, it's pretty cool. So my final purpose is to help over 1 billion people find purpose. And a lot of people go, really? How are you going to do that? Well, Zuckerberg, he reaches more than that. Why not? Help people find purpose and meaning in their lives. Viktor Frankl was once asked, what's your purpose in your life? He said to help other people find purpose in their life. But he had logotherapy, which is kind of psychotherapy. You'd sit in a chair or a couch and you talk to somebody. That's expensive, hard to scale. Now maybe we can scale these things. So I started thinking about that. So I wrote this book as a graphic novel called On Purpose. You've seen some of it. I've given a lot of talks in different settings, written a lot about this area. One in particular I want to mention, I was in Heidelberg. I was called by the mayor of Heidelberg, or actually emailed, and they said, we'd like you to come to visit Heidelberg, in fact, visit this monastery in the Black Forest with us, and with the city council and with some citizens, so that we can become a more purposeful Heidelberg. Really? You don't say no to that, do you? I mean, you say, sure, no problem. And so headed out there, but across, if that's Heidelberg, if anyone's been there, it's just a beautiful ancient city. But across this bridge is this place called the Philosopher's Walk. And you can go up this Philosopher's Walk, and it goes up about 6 miles or so. And I decided at the top of Philosopher's Walk to meditate. And I was engaged in meditation when I started having these thoughts about Seneca, this Stoic philosopher, who said this. He said, it doesn't matter how much wind is in your sails if you don't have a harbor. It's a pretty cool quote, isn't it? Doesn't matter how much energy you have if you don't have a purpose. Now, we all know people who have a lot of energy, a lot of wind in their sails, and no harbor. We call them annoying people. They're annoying. It's like, oh, I want to do this, oh, I want to do that. Get a direction, really, get a purpose. Get a rudder, get some willpower, but really get that purpose. We call kids, who have a lot of energy and no direction, ADHD, right? What do? First course of therapy, we put an anchor on their boat. Really want to go, really want to go. Like Mickey's such an awesome entrepreneur. I work with entrepreneurs all the time. I don't think I've ever met one who didn't have some form of ADHD. I don't know if you do, Mickey, but anyway, they're hyper people, they want to do stuff. And, but once you give them a direction, once they see a solution to a problem, like Mickey did or others entrepreneurs here do, boom, it's like watermelon seed being spit out. They can't be stopped. And that's so awesome. So that's what I thought. That's real well-being. That's real well-being, where you have energy, you have a rudder or self-control, and you also kind of have a harbor, a direction to take. Is this making sense? So I wrote this book called Life on Purpose a couple of years ago, and this is kind of outlining it all. I also created a company called Jewel Health. Jewel is after my daughter. That was her nickname, Julia. And I'm just going to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to show you a 1.5-minute little clip about what we're doing at Jewel Health. And this is not a pitch by any means. I just want to show you what we're doing, just to let you know if this all works. I hope it does. Let's see.
We're each on this planet for a brief time. Why not make the most of it? Welcome to Jewel, your personal digital life coach. Here's how Jewel works. Picture your life as a small sailboat. Jewel focuses on 3 factors that help you live for what matters most: your energy, willpower, and purpose. That big life goal you've always wanted to pursue. Working with Jewel, you record how each day went, how much energy you had, your willpower, along with 5 factors key to living a purpose-fueled life: sleep, presence, activity, creativity, and eating, or space. You can also add 2 outcomes of your own to track, really anything you like. Jewel then takes it all, combines it with numerous environmental factors, and runs everything through a powerful analytics engine, seeking out your distinct patterns of influence. Chart daily to open all of Jewel's unique features. It takes 15 days. The more you use Jewel, the more helpful it becomes, giving you a suite of tools to improve your life. The Daily Jewel. Tailored daily advice offering just the right help at the right time. Are you on target? Goal setting based on your behavioral patterns. What makes you tick? Analyze the factors that most influence your daily life. My Outlook. Accurate predictions for the coming day along with personalized advice. Now, how about an added bonus? Purposeful people are more likely to have stronger immune systems, live longer, have a lower risk of stroke, Alzheimer's, depression, heart attacks. They even have better sex. Welcome to Jewel. It's purpose in your pocket, and your digital life coach for getting the most out of your time here on Earth.
So we just signed a contract with the AARP for 44 million Americans. We think that this is the next generation of, quote, wellness programs, moving the broccoli and treadmill approach to wellness into something much, much deeper and more purpose-driven, much more motivating, quite honestly. And we think that organizations can have purpose, too. And I just love the presentation earlier today that talked about how so many companies have these great sparkling purposes, and it's full of shit. And that's really important to understand. But at the same time, some companies are really working hard on this, and a lot of organizations are. And I have maybe a couple more minutes before I finish up, but I just wanted to mention my week this week and last week. So on Thursday, I gave a talk to a national conference on surgeons, and surgeons are so burned out. Doctors are burned out. They wanted to go back and have me talk about going back to the original purpose they got into medicine in the first place, to rejuvenate and become more resilient. Then I flew that night to London, where I met with Saudi Telecom. Saudi Telecom pointed out, I was talking to their senior execs, and they wanted to hear more about purpose. And I said, for one thing, way to go, congrats on the women driving sort of thing. They said, tip of the iceberg, dude. Just tip of the iceberg. A lot is changing, and Saudi Telecom is charged by the king to start building out more modern programming, modernization, teaching or giving people new communications so that they can, get with the rest of the world. It's awesome, and they wanted to start building Joule into this to become more purposeful, and I think that's exciting too. Then I met with a big group of entrepreneurs from around Europe who were doing this, and it was all about purpose and resilience. I'll get to that in a second. Whoops. Here, let me go back. Then I flew back, and I was invited a couple months ago by the CIA to speak. And I remember it was during the Welcoa meeting that Ryan Piccarella, who was speaking yesterday, runs. And I just got this invitation by the CIA. I turned to John, and I said, should I go to the CIA? He said, absolutely, you should. So on Monday, I had 120 people from the CIA, senior executives, Om chanting. It's pretty cool. No, it was just like they were really into purpose, and they were really into mindfulness, and I thought that's kind of fun. Then I went up and spoke to 25 top CEOs in New York City 2 days ago, and they were interested in purpose. And then yesterday I went down and spoke to the Aspen Institute, did a world workshop with the Aspen Institute at their, quote, purpose college. So this is happening. You're seeing a lot of interest in this, and some of it may be bullshit. It could well be. At the same time, when you're getting people at that level, at all of those different kinds of organizations, interested for very different reasons, I think you are seeing some sort of change. I think you're seeing this go on. I don't know if anyone's mentioned firms of endearment so far. Oh, so I don't need to talk about this. Okay, good, fine. So I'll just go through firms of endearment. You've seen some of these groups. They're really cool. They were selected according to their transcending purpose, their revenue transcending purpose, and their commitment to their employees, their customers, and their community. And they were compared against the S&P 500 and compared against good to great companies. You're familiar with those. So I'll just reiterate this real fast. But when you look at these, at first, after 3 years, the S&P 500 was kicking their butts. S&P 500 included Philip Morris. I'm sorry, the good to great companies. Good to great company included Philip Morris, a tobacco company. Maybe not the most transcending of purposes that they could come up with, in my opinion. But, so they were kicking butt. Then suddenly they're kind of coalescing after 5 years. And suddenly, look, the firms of endearment started doing better. And then finally, we need this whole y-axis because this is what happened. You saw close to a 1,700% return on investment from the firms of endearment. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Maybe this is actually good business. So maybe Milton Friedman actually, when he said, it's all about this short-term shareholder value, maybe he was actually full of shit when he talked about that. Because if you look at this, what you're seeing is that that's absolutely wrong nowadays. Thinking more about your customers, about your employees, about your community may pay off. I mean, this is still experimental, but there are 3 other studies that support this now with different organizations that have been selected. So I would just say in closing that the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century, and again, a lot of my background is in computer programming. I gradually moved more into being a behavioral scientist, but I'd say it won't occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be a human being. And I think this Love Summit perfectly epitomizes what it means to be a human being. If we don't do this, if we don't get this right this century, there will not be a next century. We have to get this right. It's essential. So just to close, we're all frogs. We're still, I mean, I certainly am, and I am not perfect by any means, and I doubt whether anybody else is. I'm guessing that everybody to some extent is a boiling frog in this room. For me personally, my daughter is in my heart and always will be, and gives me a big part of my purpose. Not the only purpose, but a big part of my purpose. And together, what I feel is that we can jump out of the pot. And we do that together. We transcend together. And she's still very alive in me when I think about that. When we ask people what their purposes are, I've asked, I don't know, probably 20,000 people, to fight for a more just world. That's somebody's purpose. Another is to get a stupid job someday. That's one of my students, probably. One of my favorite purposes is to be helpful, vulnerable, daring, strange, honest, refreshing, affectionate, unconventional, decisive, bold, empathic, grateful, curious, and outrageous. Don't you want to meet this person? It's pretty amazing. What an awesome purpose. In the 16th century, there was a poet in Japan named Basho. He developed the haiku poem. And his most famous poem in the 16th century was called the frog haiku, of all things. And here's the frog haiku. Into the ancient pond, a frog jumps. Water sound. What does that mean? I'd say that the ancient pond is our lives. It's our family, it's our personal life, it's our community, it's where we work. And every once in a while, if we just take a little jump, if we say, you know what, I am going to change my life right now. I'm at a little crossroads, and I'm going to just jump out of this water today and do something very different, be different. If we all did that, I think we would change the world. Thank you very much.